Saul was persecuting followers of Jesus. Saul was arresting them, having them beaten. Saul was doing everything he could to stamp down the Jesus movement. And then Christ came to him on the Damascus road in a blinding light and a voice from heaven. He experienced Christ himself. And he goes from trying to arrest and beat followers of Jesus, he goes from that to suddenly being energized to spread the message of Christ to everyone. He had experienced the love of Christ, and now he wants everyone to have it. It's a complete turnaround, a 180. Recently, I heard a pro athlete say they had turned around the losing team 360 degrees. That's not very impressive, I thought. But Paul is a true 180. Paul, because even his name is changed from Saul to Paul. A total 180. And now he wants to bring the experience he's had of Christ to everyone. He becomes a man on a mission to bring that message, a man on the mission. I know even the Blues Brothers were on a mission from God. But Paul does not need cool shades. He's had this experience. He wants others to know of it. So immediately he heads to the island of Cyprus and then into the Roman provinces of Pamphylia and Galatia, trying to create house churches, trying to create groups that will follow Jesus, trying to tell them of this Christ. He's a man on a mission, and he heads up into Macedonia, into the Roman cities of Athens and Corinth and Thessalonica, Philippi, creating these churches, groups that will also experience the Christ for themselves. He's a man on the mission. He heads up into Asia Minor, what we now call Turkey, the capital city, Ephesus, and then he sends a follower to start a house church in Colossia. Now, he's never been there, so you have the letter, part of the letter in your hand to the Colossians. Just west of Ephesus, he's not been there, but he wants them to experience Christ for themselves. I will spend 3 weeks. We will together in this letter to the Colossians. 3 weeks. Now you can read it in about 7 minutes. It's that short. In fact, I recommend when you come to church over the next couple weeks, just before the worship starts, pull it up on your phone. You can peruse the whole letter in just a few moments before the worship starts. You could do it now during my sermon. You might want to. You might want to do that. Paul is writing this letter to express as fully as he can that Christ is central to everything we're about. That this Christianity that it will become is all about Christ. And did you notice how exalted the language has become? The word itself, Christ, is evolving and becoming this lush, rarefied language. Did you hear it? Christ is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. In Christ, all things are created, whether in heaven or on earth, rulers, powers, authorities, all created in Christ, the visible and the invisible. Christ was before all things. Are you hearing how cosmic this is? Christ is before all things, and in Christ all things hold together. Do you hear how rarefied, exalted this language is? The word Christ itself is evolving from, we know Jesus. Jesus was this humble, poor carpenter, a sage traveling around teaching people of love and healing others. But somehow the word includes all of that Everything about Jesus, the word Christ includes, but now it also means the very essence of reality. You see, when we say the word Christ at church, many people don't know this, how polyvalent and rich and dense that word is, including everything Jesus was about, tethered to that, but now meaning the essence of reality. Oh, the word Christ. I know you hear ministers say it all the time, but are you keeping its sweep of meaning to mind? So remember the divine equation. It will remind you what that word Christ means. We have a divine equation. Let me remind you. So first we know that God is love. We know that 1 John chapter 4. No one has ever seen God, but when we love each other, God abides in us. And God's love is perfected in us, for God is love. Okay, first part of the equation, God is love. And then through the witness of the gospel, we see in Jesus this perfect actualization of love. It's like pure love manifest. And through the Gospels and through faith, we realize that Jesus is divine. That's the second part of the equation. God is love, and Jesus is divine. When you say Jesus is divine, you're saying Jesus is love. Follow the equation. God is love, Jesus is love, and so now when we say Christ, we mean this love that is the structure of the universe itself, the essence through which all things are created, all things are held together in Christ. Oh, what a word when we say Christ. It should blow your mind. It's so beautiful, so capacious in meaning, so rich. So Paul is writing this letter to make sure the Colossians keep Christ at the center of all things. And whatever Christianity is going to be about, it's got to be primarily about Christ. I tell you, sometimes I'm not so sure Christianity is keeping Christ central. Really. It's like we almost lose the sense, this is what it's all about. We lose that sense. You see, if Christianity was all about the Christ, then every Christianity you see would be gentle, humble, peaceful, loving, just. If it was about Christ, it would shimmer with that. But I don't always see that about Christianity. Did you see this week when the Southern Baptists doubled down on saying women can't be preachers? It doesn't seem like that's about Christ. And I see all versions of Christianity going sideways, not keeping Christ at the very center of what all this is about. When I was a young pastor, I had a church on the San Francisco Peninsula, and it was on a super busy street, and it was going to be my first Christmas, so I wanted to hang this massive banner on the building that everybody driving by would see it about our Christmas services, right? It was huge. And I came the first morning, it was supposed to be draped across the whole building, and as I'm walking up to the church, I noticed the banner forgot the letter T in Christmas. It said Christmas. We misspelled it. We took Christ out of Christmas. And so the cars are already driving by the church, and so I'm running around trying to find a ladder. I've got to get that banner down, and I'm racing around, and I find a ladder, and I'm putting it up against the building, and someone rolls down their window as they go by, and they yell out to me, "Who the hell is Chris?" I know you've heard preachers say we have to put Christ back into Christmas. I took Christ right out of Christmas. I got that banner down as fast as I can. Well, it's more important to make sure we keep Christ in Christianity. itself. Christianity is supposed to be all about Jesus to a T, and I took out the T. Christianity is supposed to be all about Christ. Christ is at the center. Christianity, if you take out the Christ, all you have is inanity. Well, you actually have eanity, but it sounds better. Christianity without Christ is inanity. It's a name. It doesn't mean what it's supposed to mean. So Paul is writing this letter saying, keep Christ at the center of everything we do. Now, he's writing this letter because he's heard the Colossians are going a little sideways. Just like I said Christianity can do today. They're starting to follow some other philosophy. Now, scholars don't know exactly what philosophy this little house church was falling under. There were so many philosophies and religious groups in Asia Minor. There were mystery cults and Gnostic groups and all sorts of different perspectives and philosophies of life. But in some way, Paul thinks they're falling under the influence of some other philosophy. Do you know, I think I see people falling under the influence of a philosophy today that's not about Christ. I do. I think there is more and more a basic philosophy that has a grip on people. This philosophy, it's really basic. It's the idea that there is no spiritual realm. There's no God or there's no spiritual realm. This philosophy says that really all there is what we can see, this life. This philosophy, you could call it a physicalism, that all there is matter. There's no spiritual realm, and all that matters is this life and how it goes. And so if that's your philosophy, there's no spiritual realm. If that's your philosophy, this is all we've got, then what will begin to matter more than anything else is your own success, because this is all you've got. And there's many different versions of success, but whatever your version of success is, that'll become paramount. There's nothing else that matters eternally or will matter more. It's just now. And so you better be a success. There's lots of different versions of this success idea. Maybe you think what your life is about, to be a success, you want to fall in love and have a family. That's a beautiful version of success. It's great. But that will mean everything to you. If there's no spiritual realm, if there's no God, then that would be everything. And my friends, for some people that won't happen. And life would be just a tragedy if you don't achieve whatever version of success you have. Or even if you achieved that version, this life is transient. Family doesn't exist that long. It passes. If there's no spiritual realm, your own success matters most. What version of success are you holding? Because that would be everything, and it will be a tyranny over you. I know for me, I've always had this type of insecurity in me. And I always imagined, in some way, I didn't really measure up. And so my version of success was to achieve enough in life that I would gain some respect. I had some version of success that if I did enough things or achieved enough and was well thought of, that's success. But think how grueling that can be if that's everything. What's your version of success? I mean, maybe for some people it's money and material things, sure, but there's many versions of success. And if you don't think there's any spiritual realm, then that means everything, and life can be tragic. So Paul, because of his experience of Christ, is trying to help people keep that philosophy central. That life isn't about what you can achieve or whether you can manifest completely your version of success. It'd be great, sure, great. But that you're being held by a love that has actually created all things, before all things. It was Paul's experience of Christ that could free people from that tyranny, whatever version of success you have. That's what an experience of Christ can do. It can change you.
It had been a difficult few years. I went from being in Puerto Rico, and then I moved to Louisiana, and then 18 months later, we're now in upstate New York. My father got a promotion there, so we moved there. And you can imagine, I had just barely gotten used to the culture and the rhythms of this place when I was all of a sudden in a whole new place. My English still wasn't good enough, and I still was trying to find my way. And by the way, moving in the middle of a sophomore year in high school is horrible. Don't believe what people tell you otherwise. And so I found myself out of place. Teachers were struggling with me. Peers were struggling with me. I couldn't find my place. And I would get home every single night. I grew up in the church. I grew up believing in Jesus. And so I would get home every single day and I would pray. I would pray that something would change. I would pray that I would get a break. I would pray that my accented tongue would start sounding better. I would pray that teachers would understand my situation. I would pray that friends would sit with me to eat lunch. And it felt like my prayers were bouncing off the ceiling of my room. I felt so hopeless. Then one day, my father told us that we had an evangelist that was preaching at the prison, was coming over for dinner. Now, when you're a preacher's kid, this happens to you, where dad brings someone home to have dinner. And so we all, dressed appropriately and gathered around table with this evangelist and, did the typical kind of small talk kind of thing, favorite thing for teenagers to do, of course. And as the dinner was winding down, my sister and I felt relieved that we had done our duty, as preacher's kids. But then the gentleman said, but before I go, would you mind if I pray for you? My sister and I kind of looked at each other and go, oh, now he wants to pray. How long is this going to take? But we, again, were dutiful children, perfect for Father's Day. So, Dad, if you're listening, I'm telling this great story. So we gathered in a circle, and as I closed my eyes, this pastor came and put his hands on my forehead. And he said this, he said, Juan Carlos, I know you feel like your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling of your room, but I have heard them. And for the next 45 seconds to a minute, this gentleman began to verbatim speak those prayers that I had been speaking in the privacy and the corner of my room. And as I closed my eyes, I could see Jesus speaking to me in that moment, that Jesus had indeed heard my prayers, and that there was a better future ahead. Maybe not immediately, but that God had great plans for me in my life. I saw Jesus that day in a powerful way. And I'm standing in this pulpit in this morning because the prayers of those days came to pass. Jesus heard them. I saw the Lord that day, and He changed absolutely everything.
Paul was changed by Christ. Each one of us can be transformed in Christ. He is before all things and holds all things together. You can realize in an instant that you are being held by a love beyond your imagination.